Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to experiment again. This is another experiment recipe using a can of canned stew. I don't use canned stew, but I did buy some to put in my pantry, and now it's past the date, but it's still good. There's nothing wrong with this can. You can still use it. There's no rust, there's no punctures or holes or bulges. So it's still a perfectly good can of stew. I usually make my stew. I don't think I have ever eaten canned stew, but I have this in my pantry for just in case. So today I'm going to experiment with it. Instead of just dumping it and heating it and eating it, I am going to turn this into hopefully a better meal. Let's see what happens with this experiment. So I'm going to pause this video and get set up in my kitchen, and I will be back. So what I have here, of course, I've got my can of can of stew here. I've got a can of green beans that I have already drained. I saved the juice just in case. And I've got the green beans right here that I have used my kitchen scissors to cut some of them down a little bit so they'll spread out evenly. It's not necessary. You don't have to use green beans. This is just what I have. But I also have to use this can of green beans. So I got the green beans here. In this bowl, I have 2 cups of flour. And to the flour, I'm going to be adding some baking powder, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, a couple shakes of black pepper, about a teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of granulated garlic, about 6 tablespoons of cold butter. It can either be straight out of the freezer or out of the refrigerator, but it has to be cold. Maybe a small handful of some Colby cheese. You can use any kind of cheese. I just so happen to have Colby. 3/4 cup of milk. And I almost forgot some dried parsley. About 1.5 teaspoons of dried parsley. I'm going to make this into a biscuit dough. So I got my measuring spoons here. And I'm going to put 3 teaspoons of baking powder to my flour. So I'm going to have my onion powder here. I'm going to put about a teaspoon of onion powder. A teaspoon of garlic. A shake or 2 of pepper. If you like your stuff more peppery, you can put more pepper in. Very, very little salt, if any, because the cheese and the butter also have salt. And the stew's going to have salt too, so maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm going to take my fork. I'm going to stir it around a little bit, and then I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of dried parsley. Six tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to grate that into my flour. I'm going to take and kind of mix this butter around to kind of get it all coated with the flour. Try and get those butter flakes coated with flour. And at this point, you want to maybe smush it in your fingers like this. Kind of get that butter all the way mixed through your flour. And at this point, you can mix this for as long as you want. You can use your fork if you want and like do your fork like this, kind of smush it in there. Yeah, that's pretty good right there. All right, now I'm going to take got a handful of this cheese, maybe 2/3 of a cup, somewhere around there. I'm going to save some cheese out, but I'm going to put about 2/3 of a cup of cheese in my flour mixture, and I'm just going to mix it until my cheese gets coated with the flour. Okay. I'm going to make a little well in my flour, and I'm going to add this milk. Once you add the milk, you have to be careful not to over mix, because the longer you mix it, the harder your biscuits will come out. So I put my 3/4 cup of milk in my flour mixture. Mix it around, get it mixed in. You don't want to beat it. Just be careful mixing it in. You don't want to knead it like a yeast bread. You don't want to do that. Just mix it until it's mixed. And it's going to be a mess. You might want to wear gloves or have clean hands, because this is going to stick to your fingers. But it is oh so good. Now I'm just going to dump this out on my cutting mat here. It's still, falling apart. It's not holding together, but it will. It will. You just want to barely mix it. Smells good. I have some excess flour right here to help unstick it off of your hands. But you just want to push it together. You don't want to knead it. Add a little bit of flour on top. It kind of cleaned my hands up here. I'm just going to form it as best as I can. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just going to push it down onto your mat. Whether it's round or squared, it doesn't matter. You want it about maybe a 1/2 inch thick. Somewhere around in there. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. You don't have to be perfect. Just like that. Ugh, still on my hands. Okay. All right, so I'm going to set my mat off to the side for a moment. Now I have another bowl. You can probably just mix this in your baking dish if you want, but I'm going to mix it in my bowl first and then dump it in my baking dish. You probably won't need to grease your baking dish, but I'm going to because of the biscuit dough and the cheese, at least the sides. This is a deep dish, 11 cup Pyrex baking dish. It's a little bit smaller than a 13 by 9, but it's pretty deep, so this should hold pretty good. This is what I'll be using to bake. I really like these dishes because then they have the plastic lids you can put on top to store in the refrigerator instead of having to separate it out into another container. I'm also going to set my oven temp for about 350 degrees. Now in this bowl, I'm going to put my stew. Get a bigger spoon. So to this stew, what I want to do, it smells good, but what I want to do is I want to make the gravy a little bit thinner because my biscuits are made with flour and they're going to soak up some of the moisture, and I don't want it to be dry. So that's why I saved the green bean juice. Now, if you don't want to save your vegetable juice, or maybe you're not going to put vegetable juice in here, I would suggest maybe some low sodium beef stock or beef bouillon, but just be cautious of how much excess salt stuff you're adding to this because there's already salt in your stew. So I'm going to just add some of this green bean juice. I've got almost 3/4 of a cup of juice, so I'm probably going to put about half of that in here. I'm just going to eyeball it. Because I don't, I want to keep some kind of a flavor in here, but I want it to be a little bit thinner than stew, so my biscuits can have something to soak. Now I'm going to add my green beans. You can use any vegetable you want. Stir my green beans in here. I don't know if I said I cut some green beans in half just to kind of let them spread out throughout the dish, and so they're not so big. Now I'm going to dump my stew into my baking dish. Wow, there's more stew than what I thought. I hope it fits. Guess we'll find out. Oh, it's going to be perfect. Perfect size dish. This smells really good, actually. I've never used canned stew. Now on top of this, I'm going to put some more cheese. You can leave the cheese off if you want, but I have it here, so I'm going to put it on. You can use a different kind of cheese or the same as what you put in the biscuits. You could probably even use maybe some jalapeno, Jack jalapeno, or whatever you call it. I don't like spicy, so that works for me. Not a lot of cheese, but good enough. Now, I'm going to take my biscuits here, and I'm going to take my butter knife, and I'm just going to draw, or I'm going to cut through maybe about 1-inch square pieces. Doesn't have to be exact. You don't need to get your ruler out, but just some small pieces to cut through because we're going to put this on top of our stew. So I'm just going to cut through here. You can surely, maybe you have Bisquick you could use. Maybe you have a can of the Pillsbury canned biscuits that you can just cut up. And I'm just going to put this all over the top of my stew. All right. Looking pretty good. I'm going to put this in my oven for about 30 minutes. And I will come back when it's finished baking and we will see what it looks like. I just pulled this out of the oven and it smells really, really good. It's all melted through. The biscuits got browned a little bit on top. It looks really good. So I'm going to let this sit here and cool for maybe 5 or so minutes, and then we're going to dig in. Look at that. It looks really, really, really good. The biscuits are cooked. They're kind of crunchy on top, but they're not overcooked. This is really steamy. Get a little piece of biscuit here. It's still pretty hot, but it smells really good, and I can smell the garlic and stuff that I put in the biscuits. This is really good. This is a good idea for canned stew. I have another can of this that I know what to do with now, and this would probably freeze up really good because I cook work lunches, and then I'll dish this up in single serve freezer containers and pop it in my freezer so I have something to take to work for my lunch and my husband too. And usually I cook big on my days off and keep adding to my freezer, but I was really busy this weekend, so today I'm kind of like cooking a bunch of meals. But this is really good. You got to try this. If you have a can of stew in your pantry that you don't know what to do with, this is a good way to doctor it up. So I hope you like this recipe. It's definitely an experiment that I'll be doing again. And I'm going to go finish my lunch. And I will see you guys next time here on Survive with What You Know. Bye.